Hello friends, you are on Ruslan Belov's channel and this is our daily update on combat operations along the Ukrainian front. It appears that after the situation with Venezuela, Donald Trump is now searching for a new opponent. Previously, he made harsh statements toward Cuba, Mexico, Greenland and Colombia. But his attention is now focused on Iran. And the reasons for this are quite obvious. In effect, the country is experiencing internal instability that is approaching a civil conflict, and for the United States together with Israel, a convenient window of opportunity has emerged to intervene, remove an undesirable regime, and install a fully controllable figure in power. What is important for us to understand is this. If the Ayatollah regime collapses, Russia will lose yet another ally. Whether this is good or bad is, in essence, a rhetorical question. Everything here is quite clear. If the current regime is dismantled, it is highly likely that a completely subordinate politician will be put in its place. Most often, the figure mentioned in this context is the heir of the Pahlavi Shah, who has long been living in the United States. It is not difficult to guess whose interests he would pursue if he were to come to power in Iran. Naturally, American interests. This is the picture that is taking shape. We continue to closely monitor the situation and whether the United States will decide on direct intervention. Judging by statements from Trump himself, Defense Secretary Hegseth, and a number of U.S. senators, the likelihood of this is extremely high. In short, once again, something serious appears to be brewing. The year 2026 has only just begun, yet it is already full of surprises. Meanwhile, combat operations on the Ukrainian front continue, and we move directly to an analysis of the current situation. So friends, the Russian army is maintaining a high tempo of offensive operations. Over the past 2 days, 3 settlements have come under control, and the total area of liberated territory has amounted to nearly 90 square kilometers. In addition, a significant number of positive reports from the front have emerged over the past 24 hours, which we will examine in detail today. Against this backdrop, all of Zelensky's recent statements look, to put it mildly, detached from reality. I remind you that yesterday he once again stated that Ukraine is allegedly ready to withdraw troops from the Donetsk region on the condition that Russia retreats by the same distance. In other words, hypothetically speaking, Kiev withdraws its forces by 50 kilometers, and the Russian army is expected to do the same, which would effectively mean pulling back almost to Debaltseve. Such a proposal might have appeared logical only if the front line were in a state of stagnation, as was the case, for example, in 2023. At that time, Russian forces were advancing by roughly 1 to 1.5 square kilometers per day, and even that with great difficulty, while the armed forces of Ukraine also achieved limited local advances. In effect, a certain parity existed. Let me remind you that by the end of 2023, Russian troops had advanced approximately 600 square kilometers, while Ukrainian forces had advanced around 500. A difference of 100 square kilometers over an entire year could indeed be considered relative balance. But the situation now is fundamentally different. Ukrainian forces are barely advancing at all, while the Russian army is confidently moving forward. Therefore, let us move on to the review and see who is advancing, and by how much in reality. We begin with the Lyman sector. Here, Russian units continue to break through the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. In the episode before last, we already discussed how Russian fighters managed to enter the city of Sviatohirsk. Now they have advanced another 2.5 kilometers and managed to gain a foothold in the village of Encircle. It was not possible to immediately dislodge Ukrainian forces from there, but Russian troops succeeded in securing positions within the residential areas. This direction is of strategic importance, as it opens a vector of movement toward the Kharkiv region and the city of Izium. From Alexandrivka to the border with the Kharkiv region is only about 500 meters, and to Izium roughly 20 kilometers. Yes, the Oskil River lies ahead, but this does not diminish the significance of the advance. At the same time, the primary objective here is to block Sviatohirsk from the northern direction. The Izium-Sviatohirsk highway runs through Alexandrivka, and with the current advance, it has effectively been cut. It is important to understand that this road was the main logistical artery, since the bridge near Bohorodikny had previously been destroyed. As a result, supply along this route is no longer possible. Of course, losing this road does not mean a complete collapse of Ukrainian logistics. Pontoon crossings remain. But cutting supply routes is always one of the key building blocks of future success. We move further along the Lyman direction, where additional updates have also appeared, both in terms of advances and setbacks. I remind you that just a few days ago, citing a reliable source, I informed you that Russian troops had managed to take control of farms on the northern outskirts of Lyman. This has now been confirmed. After several days, cartographers have reflected this advance on the maps. Thus, the information proved to be accurate. The farm complexes are under Russian control, and from these positions, attempts are already being made to probe Ukrainian defenses in the northern part of Lyman. At the same time, control over the private residential sector in Lyakivka was lost. This is the eastern part of Lyman, which is formally designated as a separate settlement, but administratively falls within the city limits. Previously, Lyakivka had been under Russian control, but that position has now been lost. In return, Russian forces managed to advance further south and secure positions on Lizna and Limanska streets. As a result, the encirclement around Lyman continues to tighten. Pressure is being applied from both the east and the north. Nevertheless, the situation remains difficult, as Ukrainian forces still retain the capability to hold back the advance and even conduct counterattacks in certain areas. Reports indicate a 4-kilometer breakthrough by assault units of the 20th Combined Arms Army from the area of the Yarova railway station toward the eastern outskirts of Sviatohirsk, moving through a forested area near the Martinenkovy swamp. In addition, a 3-kilometer stretch of the shoreline along the Siversky Donets River has been taken under control. From the direction of the Sosnov railway station, the northern envelopment of Sviatohirsk is tightening, indicating the beginning of the formation of a tactical pocket around the city. At the same time, all crossings over the Siversky Donets in this sector are being systematically destroyed by Russian FAB aerial bombs and missile strikes. This places the logistics of the Ukrainian 115th Mechanized Brigade under serious threat and effectively means that assault operations against Sviatohirsk have begun. There is also another important factor to consider. On the southern bank of the Siversky Donets, approximately 2 kilometers from Sviatohirsk, Ukrainian forces hold dominant high ground, elevations exceeding 180 meters, in the area of the Holy Dormition Lavra. The Russian side is attempting to partially offset this advantage through dominance in the number of FPV drones and reconnaissance UAVs employed. In addition, Russian forces are attempting to develop the offensive in the settlement of Drobyshev. Ukrainian forces are providing fire resistance from the direction of Prishayb. The Russian army has expanded its control within the forested area, completely eliminating the grey zone in Novoselivka. Territorial expansion has also been recorded near the road leading to Oleksandrivka. Pressure on Oleksandrivka itself continues. Russian units did not stop at their achieved positions and advanced toward Vovchi Yar. At the same time, intensive strikes are being carried out against Ukrainian positions in Korovy Yar as part of preparations for further assault actions. On the Rai-Oleksandrivka direction, which some are already calling the Sloviansk direction, updates have come in regarding the settlement of Zakotne. Here, forested areas were cleared, and Russian forces advanced approximately 2 kilometers deeper into residential zones. It should be noted that the armed forces of Ukraine are committing significant forces to contain the Russian advance, as they clearly understand that Russian troops reaching Rai-Oleksandrivka would be critical for them. This settlement represents a key elevation, beyond which the terrain descends toward Mykolaiivka and further to Sloviansk. In practical terms, reaching Rai-Oleksandrivka would mean the imminent start of battles for Sloviansk. That is precisely why Ukrainian forces are now throwing everything they have into this area. Nevertheless, judging by the map, their defenses are weakening. With the fall of Zakotne, which Ukrainian forces will evidently be unable to hold, pressure will begin on Kryvyi Luki. From there, a road leads south directly toward Rai-Oleksandrivka. At the same time, the advance toward this node is also being carried out from the eastern direction. Overall, across this entire sector, it is becoming increasingly clear that Ukrainian forces are facing growing and serious problems. There are also reports that Russian forces have taken control of Vyrolyubivka and Markove during their advance toward Kramatorsk. the tempo of offensive operations has noticeably increased. As for Costantinivka, yesterday we examined in detail the situation in which the front was broken through from both the northern and southern directions to a depth of up to 7 kilometers. Over the past 24 hours, no new reports have emerged from those specific sectors, but an update has appeared west of Costantinivka. Russian units managed to advance north of Rusin Yar and reach the road. The advance amounted to approximately 2 kilometers in depth and about 3.5 kilometers in width. This is also part of the broader pressure being applied to Costantinivka. The key objective here will be reaching Mykolaievsky Pole, since positions there would allow effective fire control over the main and essentially the only logistical artery supplying Costantinivka, the Druzhkivka-Costantinivka highway. For now, these remain prospective developments that we are discussing. The sector itself is extremely difficult. For context, Rusin Yar came under Russian control back at the end of August, and only now has it been possible to push the front line up to the highway. Whether this success can be developed further, or whether the front will once again stabilize, will become clear in the coming weeks. We move on. Significant progress has been recorded on the sector of the front west of Pokrovsk. Here, Russian units advanced more than 4.5 kilometers northward and managed to close the pocket between Molodetske and the urban-type settlement of Udakne. In addition, an advance has been recorded north of the mine in the direction of Serhivka, with approximately 3 kilometers remaining to reach the settlement. The prospects here include 2 key points. First, taking Serhivka is critically important for fully clearing this entire sector, something we already discussed in one of our December reports. This remains one of the priority objectives in this direction. Second, gaining control over Serhivka would allow the formation of a so-called balcony to the west, which would in turn create conditions for a further advance all the way toward Mazhova. Overall, despite the capture of Pokrovsk, this sector remains extremely difficult. The long-suffering settlement of Kotlin, where fighting was already taking place a year ago, is still located in close proximity to the line of contact. According to fighters on the ground, reaching the village remains extremely challenging. Therefore, if it is possible over the next month to clear the territory up to the railway tracks and the highway, this would represent a major success and would allow this section of the front to at least breathe a little easier. Incidentally, it has become clear why progress in this area is coming with such difficulty. The primary reason is logistics. At present, supply is effectively carried out on foot. Reaching the front line by vehicle is extremely difficult. Fighters are forced to walk up to 20 kilometers on foot, wearing body armor and carrying all necessary supplies themselves. It is not hard to imagine how physically and mentally exhausting this is. That is precisely why many on the Russian side are asking a logical question. When will the troops receive heavy drones capable of carrying 10 to 20 kilograms of cargo and at least partially covering the logistical needs of the front line? We move further south. Here, a significant success has been recorded in the area of Novapavka. Russian units managed to advance approximately 5 kilometers, eliminate a tactical pocket, and continue their offensive as far as the southern outskirts of the western part of Novapavka. The immediate priority now is to close the pocket between Novapavka and Ivanivka, so that the occupied positions are stable and securely covered. Overall, judging by the configuration of the front line, Novapavka is likely to come under Russian control in the near future, possibly even before the end of the current month. This, in turn, opens a direct route toward Mazhova. From the sector of the front south of the Orikhiv and Zaporizhzhia directions, no significant news has been reported over the past 24 hours. Summing up the overall situation, over the past day, Russian forces took control of 38 square kilometers of territory previously held by the armed forces of Ukraine, with net forward movement amounting to approximately 3 square kilometers. In total, over 3 days, the Russian army captured 125 square kilometers, while Ukrainian forces over the same period took just 3 square kilometers. This is the key difference. It is also worth noting that for the winter season, the pace of advance currently being demonstrated by the Russian army is more than impressive. This concludes today's overview of the situation on the front, and I now suggest we move on to the political agenda. It has become known that another operation by the US Armed Forces is being prepared. Donald Trump stated directly that the United States intends to launch a ground operation against drug cartels on Mexican territory. After Venezuela, Washington's attention has shifted to Mexico. If in the case of Venezuela, U.S. officials referred to the so-called Cartel of the Suns as the problem, Mexico presents a far more serious situation. Numerous cartels and their factions operate there, but the most powerful and dangerous at present are considered to be the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, according to Archangel Spetsnaza. These structures possess the highest level of combat capability in terms of training and equipment. They have small arms, armored vehicles, and even UAV operators at their disposal. They control vast territories in northern and central Mexico and are engaged in fierce competition with one another for influence and new areas of control. Previously, Trump repeatedly stated that the Mexican authorities are taking insufficient measures to combat the cartels, and that criminal organizations wield more power in the country than the official government. If the United States does indeed decide to carry out a ground operation in Mexico, it is unlikely to be an easy undertaking, as it was in Venezuela. Cartel armies have traditionally been considered stronger than regular military forces and police units. They constantly increase their manpower, expand their weapons arsenals, and improve their technological capabilities. In addition, the cartels have highly developed agent-based intelligence networks. Taking all these factors into account, it becomes clear that such an operation would be extremely difficult. Not coincidentally, over the past week, the United States has significantly increased reconnaissance of Mexico's coastline using UAVs and anti-submarine aircraft. Particular attention is being paid to the Yucatan Peninsula, which lies within a zone of cartel confrontation. Separately, Trump once again commented on Greenland. According to him, the fact that Danes landed there by boat 500 years ago does not mean that the territory belongs to Denmark. He also emphasized that simply leasing Greenland would not be sufficient for the United States. When a territory is our property, we protect it. You don't protect leased land the same way. It needs to be owned, Trump said. He justified the need to include Greenland in the United States using the familiar argument of the so-called Russian-Chinese factor. According to him, Washington does not want Russia or China to appear in Greenland, because otherwise they would become neighbors of the West. That will not happen. I would prefer to resolve the Greenland issue the easy way, otherwise we will do it the hard way, Trump stated. Overall, the situation is highly illustrative. One individual is effectively dismantling traditions, norms, and international law that have existed for centuries. The example involving a boat is particularly striking. With such an approach, territorial ownership across the entire globe could be reconsidered. In addition, Donald Trump stated that the United States intercepted a vessel linked to Russia and that Moscow made no attempt to defend it. According to Trump, the Russian side tried to demonstrate its presence but ultimately refrained from protecting the ship. Yesterday, I mentioned a vessel that was essentially connected to Russia. We seized it and Russia decided not to protect it from us, he said. Meanwhile, the mayor of Lviv reported serious damage caused by a strike from the Russian Oreshnik missile. According to him, Ukrainian air defense systems did not detect the missile's flight. It was not picked up by radar, and the time from launch to impact was less than 10 minutes. At the same time, as Sadovi emphasized, the missile did not carry an armed warhead, which made it possible to avoid large-scale destruction and casualties. Nevertheless, one critical infrastructure facility was hit. He described the damage as extremely severe, though not the maximum possible. The mayor of Lviv called the incident a demonstration of force and linked the strike to the city's proximity to the European Union border. As of today, he stated, Ukraine does not possess technologies capable of intercepting missiles of this type. He assessed the strike itself as a signal addressed to the United States and European countries.